For many years in the world of video games, advertisements usually just tried to promote a certain console or game while only briefly mentioning what the competition was doing, if at all. It wasn't until the 90s when things really started to heat up and the gloves came off. As Nintendo and Sega went head-to-head, advertisement campaigns started to get more cutthroat within the industry, with shots fired from many directions, whether it be about whose mascot was better, whose console was the fastest, or the ever-so-famous who had the most bits. Things definitely got ugly for a while. Things really got started as Sega was trying to take advantage of its new hardware, the Genesis, which was more powerful than the console that was dominating the market, the Nintendo Entertainment System. Sega boasted that the Genesis, with its 16 bits, was capable of almost perfect arcade ports, with more colors, bigger sprites, and better sound than the NES. In 1990, Sega started the Genesis Does campaign, which claimed that the Genesis does what Nintendo don't. A clever play on words. This came complete with a catchy song just for the occasion.
Genesis does
16-bit arcade graphics.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis does
16-bit sports action.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis does.
Get Joe Montana free, Pat Riley free, Buster Douglas free, Super Monaco GP free, or Collins free.
Genesis does.
What Nintendo don't.
It was clear to see that the Genesis was superior to the NES, but Nintendo had a little something up their sleeve called the Super Nintendo, which would more fairly compete with Sega's 16-bit console. Sales for the Genesis would slow as competition got a little more intense, but that didn't stop Sega from taking more jabs at Nintendo. You might remember the phrase blast processing, which was thrown into an ad campaign trying to prove that the Genesis was more powerful than the SNES.
The Sega Genesis has blast processing. Super Nintendo doesn't. So what's blast processing do? And what if you don't have blast processing?
From blast processing to bits. Bits had been important since the days of the NES and remained huge in the battle between the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. One company that decided to jump the gun and outdo everybody was Atari, who in 1993 was about to release the Jaguar, a 64-bit console. Atari's entire ad campaign was based on these bits as they felt this would help sell consoles.
Some of you believe your system is the most advanced in the universe. Let's review the numbers. Sega Genesis is 16 bits. 3DO is 32 bits. The Atari Jaguar is 64 bits. Which is more advanced? Clifford! With 64 bits, 3D graphics, real-world animation, and lightning speed that you can only get with Jaguar. Which is more advanced? Clifford!
Can you repeat the question?
Jaguar! Jaguar! Jaguar!
With two 32-bit processors on board, many have debated over the last 20-plus years on whether or not the Jaguar was a true 64-bit console, especially since the games didn't quite deliver visually. This was when the world started to realize that maybe bits weren't the end-all be-all of video games. Back at Sega, they weren't quite done picking on the competition with subtle jabs at Nintendo during the Sega CD era.
Hey! You still don't have a Sega CD?
Huh?
What are you waiting for? Nintendo to make one? You have seen the games, right? Wrong answer, man. Show 'em! Want to see more?
And once the Sega Saturn was released, the company fired more shots, not only at the newly released Nintendo 64.
There are lots of good reasons to go with Sega Saturn instead of Pretendo. We call them games. Sega Saturn has tons of them. Pretendo has just a few. It does beg the question, do you want to play or twiddle your thumbs? Face it, Pretendo, you weren't worth waiting for.
But also at a new rival in the market, the Sony PlayStation.
Never been a game that's allowed you to fly, fluid and free, in real-time 3D. Never, not anywhere. But especially not on that other system. Simply because, with only one processor, it doesn't have the power to do it. Fly, plaything, fly. You're not ready.
Sony, in the meantime, decided to take aim at Nintendo, specifically at the company's mascot, Mario. As Sony was pushing their own new mascot, Crash Bandicoot, they decided to let Mario know that there was some serious competition in town.
Hey, plumber boy, mustache man, your worst nightmare has arrived.
Pack up your stuff. I got a little surprise for you here.
Check it out. What do you think about that? We got real-time, 3D, lush organic environments. How's that make you feel, buddy?
Feel a little like your days are numbered?
I'm gonna have to ask you to leave.
You're hurting my elbow.
Is that Italian?
No, Bandicoot is an Australian name.
But it wasn't only the big-name console developers that battled it out. Even the two biggest powerhouses in the fighting game world would eventually become tangled in this cutthroat advertising web. Nintendo remained pretty quiet despite all of the attacks from numerous competitors. After the failure of the Saturn, Sega toned down their ads quite a bit, focusing more on what they had to offer instead of what the competition didn't. It's clear that things have changed quite a bit these days, with pretty conservative ads and fewer shots fired between console manufacturers and game publishers. But it's safe to say that rivalries within the industry live on to this day. They're just approached a bit differently. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching and liking and subscribing and all that good stuff. And just like always, be sure to stay tuned for more Spotlight video game reviews.